He woke up early, as he always did. The sun had just started peeking through the curtains, and the small apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. He stretched, rubbed his eyes, and thought about the day ahead. Being a single dad was not easy. Every morning felt like a careful balancing act, making sure his little one had breakfast, got dressed, and was ready for school, all while preparing for his own workday. Some days it felt like there weren't enough hours in the day, but he never let that stop him. After a quick shower and a simple breakfast, he packed his child's school bag and double-checked everything. Lunch packed, homework tucked in, jacket zipped up. With a gentle kiss on the forehead and a promise to be back in time, he sent his child off to school. Then he grabbed his own things and headed out. Today he had a short job to finish at a corporate building downtown. It wasn't glamorous work. He cleaned offices, fixed small maintenance issues, and sometimes ran errands for the building, but he took pride in doing it well. The streets were already busy. Cars honked, buses rumbled past, and people hurried along the sidewalks, talking on phones or clutching coffee cups. He walked steadily, aware of every step, careful to avoid the puddles left from last night's rain. The city had its chaos, but he had grown used to it. It had a rhythm, a pulse, and he knew exactly how to move with it. When he arrived at the building, he greeted the security guard with a nod. The guard knew him by now, and he returned the greeting with a tired but friendly smile. The building itself was tall and shiny, its glass reflecting the bright morning light. Inside, it smelled faintly of coffee, polished floors, and a hint of fresh flowers from the lobby. People bustled in all directions, dressed in suits or business casual, clutching briefcases or bags, clearly already deep in their own busy worlds. He headed to the area he needed to work on. It was a routine checkup, something he had done countless times before. The lift was old but functional, and today he was supposed to make sure it was running smoothly. He pulled out his tools and began inspecting the panels, checking the wiring, making small adjustments here and there. The job was simple but required attention to detail. He was halfway through when he heard a faint call for help. At first he thought it was someone in one of the offices, but the sound came from the lift. He walked over and saw the doors slightly ajar. Inside, a woman was standing, looking anxious, her hand pressed against the panel. She was dressed sharply in business attire, clearly a high-powered professional, and yet her posture now showed tension and unease. "Excuse me," she said, her voice a mix of frustration and panic. The lift just stopped. "I can't move it, and I'm stuck." He quickly assessed the situation. The lift had indeed stopped between floors, and the emergency button seemed to be malfunctioning. "Don't worry," he said calmly, trying to reassure her. "I'll help you. It might take a few minutes, but you're safe." She gave a small nod, though her hands fidgeted nervously. "I have a meeting in less than 30 minutes. I can't be late," she said, her voice tight with stress. He smiled faintly, understanding. "I get it. But panicking won't help. Just take a deep breath. I'll take care of it." While he worked to figure out a solution, they began talking. At first, it was small talk. She asked him how long he had worked in the building. He replied simply, explaining his jobs and responsibilities, never boasting but never hiding the truth. She shared a little about her day, about the pressure of managing her company and the endless demands on her time. As they spoke, her tension slowly eased. His calm and steady presence had a way of grounding her, making the situation feel less overwhelming. He checked the wiring again, pressed a few buttons, and tested the mechanisms. "It looks like a small mechanical issue," he said. "I think I can get it moving again, but I'll need you to stay calm and follow my instructions." She nodded. "Okay, I trust you," she said, though her voice still carried a hint of anxiety. He gave her a reassuring smile and began working carefully. The lift creaked and groaned, but his hands were steady. Every adjustment he made was precise, every step deliberate. Outside, the hallway was filled with the faint echo of people walking by, unaware of the small drama unfolding just a few feet away. As he worked, they continued talking. She shared stories about her company, the challenges she faced, and the rare moments when she actually felt proud of her accomplishments. He listened, genuinely interested, occasionally offering small comments or questions that made her smile. For a moment, the world outside the lift seemed to disappear. It was just the two of them, two people from very different lives connecting in an unexpected way. Minutes passed, and finally, He found the problem, a simple stuck relay. He carefully adjusted it and pressed the button to test the lift. Slowly, it began to move again. The woman let out a sigh of relief, gripping the side of the lift for support. "You did it," she said, her voice full of gratitude.
"I don't know how to thank you," he shook his head. "No need."
"Just glad you're safe." When the lift doors finally opened fully on the ground floor, she stepped out and took a deep breath, as if she had just been freed from a long ordeal. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment there was something unspoken in her eyes. Respect, admiration, and perhaps a flicker of something more. "I'm really impressed," she said softly. "Most people would just call for help and wait. You actually helped. You stayed calm, focused. That means a lot." He shrugged modestly. "It's just what anyone would do. You'd do the same for someone else, I'm sure." She smiled, though it was tinged with awe. "Not everyone would," she said. "You've got a remarkable way about you. Calm, patient, kind. Rare qualities, really." He nodded, a little embarrassed by the praise. "I just try to do my best. That's all." For a moment they stood in silence. The noise of the building faded into the background. The brief encounter, born out of an unexpected emergency, had left a mark on both of them. She was impressed by his humility, his strength, and the gentle confidence he carried. He, in turn, couldn't help but notice the human side of someone he might have assumed was untouchable in her high-powered world. She was more than just a CEO. She was a person, stressed and vulnerable, but capable of warmth and sincerity. Finally, she shook her head and smiled. "Thank you again." "I won't forget this," he nodded. "Take care of yourself," he said, and with that he turned to leave, heading back to his work. The day was far from over, and he had more tasks waiting. But something about the encounter lingered. He couldn't quite put it into words, but he felt a small spark of connection, a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, could create moments that mattered. As he walked away, he caught a glimpse of her watching him from the lift, a faint smile on her face. He didn't look back, but inside he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. Life was busy, complicated, and sometimes unfair. But in that small moment he had made a difference, and that was enough. And little did he know, this brief encounter in a lift would set off a chain of events that neither of them could have anticipated. It was just the beginning, a single act of courage and kindness that would soon ripple into something much larger, touching both of their lives in ways they could never imagine. After that day, life returned to its usual rhythm for him. Mornings were still hectic with breakfast, school prep, and early commutes. Evenings were filled with homework, dinner, and bedtime stories. He barely had time to think about himself, let alone the strange encounter in the lift, yet somehow that brief moment kept replaying in his mind. There was something about the way she had looked at him, the way her tension had melted when he stayed calm. It was unexpected, and yet it stayed with him, a quiet reminder that even small actions mattered. That week, he returned to his regular routine of cleaning, fixing, and running errands. He moved through the building with practiced ease, greeting security guards, janitors, and occasional office workers. But he noticed something subtle that he hadn't before. People seemed busier, more stressed. Some seemed frustrated at the smallest delays. He realized that the lift incident was a perfect example of how easily panic could take over when someone felt trapped, whether physically or in their own responsibilities. Meanwhile, she, the CEO, couldn't stop thinking about him either. Back in her office, sitting behind a large mahogany desk, she replayed the moment in her head. She admired his calm demeanor, the way he focused on the problem without letting fear or pride get in the way. She had met many people in her life, employees, assistants, clients, but few had left such an impression on her. It was more than just the act of helping. It was the character he had shown in that small, intense moment. She found herself smiling at the memory, feeling oddly inspired. Later that week, their paths crossed again, though not by intention. She had a meeting in one of the offices he maintained, and he was called in to check something in the building systems. When she saw him, she was momentarily taken aback. "You're back," she said with a small smile, trying to mask her curiosity. He nodded, offering a polite smile. "Yeah, just checking a few things, making sure everything is working." She noticed the way he carried himself, humble, yet confident. It was a stark contrast to the people she usually dealt with, who either rushed through tasks or demanded attention without considering others. Something about him felt genuine, grounded. She wanted to say more, to ask how he managed everything in his life, but she held back. She didn't want to seem intrusive, yet the urge to know more about him was strong. He went about his work, repairing a minor issue in the office's electrical system. She watched quietly, impressed by his focus and dedication. He moved with purpose, not rushing, yet never wasting a second. It was clear he took pride in his work, not because of recognition or reward, but because it mattered to him to do things well. She realized how rare that was in a world where most people chased status, money, or praise. After a while, he noticed her observing him. He looked up and nodded politely. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. "I just appreciate how you handle things. It's calming." He shrugged lightly, unsure how to respond. "I just try to do what's right. That's all." Her smile widened, not in mockery or flattery, but in genuine respect. "It's more than that. You don't know how rare it is to meet someone like you." He felt a strange warmth at her words. Not pride exactly, but a quiet acknowledgement that he was seen for who he really was, not just for the jobs he did or the struggles he carried. Most days he moved through life feeling invisible, unnoticed except for his responsibilities. But here, in this brief exchange, someone had truly noticed him. It was a small moment, but it lingered, like a light flickering in a room that had been dark for too long. The next few days were uneventful, in the sense of routine, but the memory of their interaction stayed with both of them. He found himself thinking, she's not just a CEO, she's human too. And she thought, he's more than a worker in my building. He's someone remarkable. Neither of them realized how significant these thoughts would soon become. One afternoon, as he left work, he noticed a small commotion near the building's entrance. A delivery truck had blocked the road, and a few people were arguing over how to move it. Without hesitation, he stepped in, calmly guiding the driver and helping clear the way. People began to notice his presence, not just his actions, but the way he handled the situation without frustration or pride. A few office workers whispered to each other, "That guy, he's always so calm, so helpful." She, passing by in her car, caught sight of him again. She was struck by how effortlessly he managed the situation. It wasn't about showing off or being seen. It was about doing what needed to be done. That quality, that rare mix of humility and strength, left her feeling inspired. She made a note to herself, "I need to talk to him again. There's something about him I can't ignore." Later that evening, he returned home exhausted but satisfied. His child greeted him with a big smile and a story about their day at school. He listened, asked questions, and laughed at the small jokes and observations. Moments like these were his anchor, reminding him why he kept going despite exhaustion, despite challenges. Life was hard, but these little connections made it worth it. That night, after putting his child to bed, he sat in the quiet of the apartment. He thought about the week, the lift, the people in the building, the small victories, and the challenges he faced every day. Somewhere in the mix, he remembered the CEO, her gratitude and her words of respect. He smiled quietly to himself. It was strange how a brief encounter could leave such a lasting impact. He wondered if she thought about him too, or if he was just a fleeting memory in her busy world. The following morning, he returned to work, ready for another day. The building was as busy as ever, people rushing past, phones ringing, elevators moving up and down. He focused on his tasks, cleaning, fixing, checking systems, always alert, always careful. And yet, beneath the routine, there was a sense of anticipation, a feeling that something might happen again, something unexpected, something that could change the usual rhythm of life. Later that week, he was called to the lobby. She was there, waiting, holding a small cup of coffee, looking slightly more relaxed than before. When he approached, she greeted him with a warm smile. "Hi," she said simply. "I wanted to say thanks again. Not just for the lift, but for how you handled everything." He shook his head, smiling modestly. "It was nothing. Just helping someone. That's all." She paused, considering her words carefully. "It's not nothing. It meant a lot to me. More than I can explain. You make people feel safe even when things are scary. That's rare." Her sincerity caught him off guard. Most people thanked him quickly and moved on, but she took the time to speak from the heart. He felt a warmth spread through him, not pride, exactly, but a deep sense of connection, as if someone truly understood him, beyond the surface. They stood for a moment in the bustling lobby, Two people from different worlds, yet somehow connected by a simple act of kindness. Outside, life carried on. The hum of the city, the rush of people, the noise of the streets. But in that small bubble of space, there was a quiet understanding. Words weren't necessary to explain it. It was felt, shared, understood. She took a deep breath and smiled. I'd like to know more about you. Not your job, not what you do, but you. If you're willing. He blinked, surprised. Few people had ever asked that before. Most judged him by his work, his appearance, or his situation. But here she was, asking simply to know him. He felt a mixture of curiosity, caution, and intrigue. I suppose, he said slowly. I don't usually talk about myself much. She nodded gently. I understand. But I think you have a story worth hearing. And maybe we could help each other see things differently. For a moment, he considered it. His life was busy, full of responsibilities, and he rarely had time for anyone else. But something in her eyes and her calm sincerity made him pause. Perhaps this was not just another busy person in the city. Perhaps this was someone who genuinely wanted to understand, to connect. And so, for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to imagine the possibility. The lift had been a small, unexpected moment, but it had opened a door. And now, standing there in the lobby, he felt that perhaps, just perhaps, this was the start of something meaningful. Little did he know, the weeks ahead would bring challenges, surprises, and conversations that neither of them could have predicted. That simple act of helping someone trapped in a lift had set a chain of events into motion, linking their lives in ways that went far beyond a single moment of courage. For now, though all that mattered was the quiet connection, the understanding, and the first spark of trust, two people from very different lives, brought together by chance, slowly discovering that sometimes the smallest acts could lead to the biggest changes. The next morning began like any other for him, with the soft light of dawn creeping into his small apartment. He made breakfast, packed his child's lunch, and helped with school preparations, all while humming a quiet tune. Life was routine, predictable, but he had learned to appreciate the small joys, his child's laughter, the warm smell of toast, the feeling of accomplishment after a hard day of work. Yet despite the comfort of routine, the thought of her lingered. The CEO, the woman he had helped in the lift. Her gratitude, her sincerity, her words, they were difficult to forget. He arrived at the building and immediately set to work. Today, his tasks included checking the maintenance systems and ensuring everything ran smoothly. The hallways were already alive with activity. People rushing to meetings, assistants carrying folders, security guards guiding visitors. But his focus was steady. He had a job to do and he took pride in doing it well. Around midday, he was called to one of the building's busiest areas. A group of employees had reported a problem with the lift again. As he approached, he could hear the soft hum of machinery and the occasional frustrated sigh. The lift had stopped between floors, and this time it wasn't just an inconvenience. It had left a few people trapped inside. He quickly assessed the situation. The lift was stuck, and there was visible panic from those inside. He immediately called out, "Is everyone okay? Can you hear me?" A few muffled voices responded, confirming they were safe but anxious. Among them was the familiar voice of the CEO. She sounded calm but tense, her tone betraying a hint of worry. "I'll get you out," he called back. "Stay calm, follow my instructions, and everything will be fine." He moved with precision, checking the control panels and testing the system. His mind worked quickly, calculating the safest way to release the lift without causing harm to anyone inside. He had done this before, but the presence of multiple people, including someone he had grown to respect, made him extra cautious. Inside the lift, she tried to maintain a calm demeanor. She had faced crises in her professional life, but this was different. There was no team to manage, no strategy to follow, just the uncertainty of being trapped in a metal box, reliant on someone else's skill and judgment. She remembered the way he had handled things before, his steady voice, his calm confidence, and it gave her hope. Outside, he continued working, speaking through the intercom to keep them reassured. "We're going to release the doors slowly. Keep your hands clear and stay away from the edges. I need you all to move back slightly while I adjust the system." They complied, following his instructions carefully. The tension inside the lift was palpable, each second stretching longer than the last. He felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that even a small mistake could cause panic or injury. But he stayed focused, his mind entirely on the task at hand. As he worked, the CEO's voice came through again. "I'm trying not to panic, but it's hard," she admitted, her tone unusually vulnerable. "I've handled so much in my life, but this is different." He smiled softly, even though she couldn't see him. "It's okay to feel that way. Panic won't help anyone. Just take deep breaths, focus on my voice, and we'll get through this together." Her breathing slowed slightly, and she nodded to herself, drawing on his calm presence to steady her nerves. The others in the lift also seemed reassured by his guidance, the tension easing bit by bit. After careful adjustments, he was able to manipulate the lift mechanism to allow it to move slightly. Slowly, the doors began to open, and a small ray of light fell on the faces inside. Relief was immediate. The CEO exhaled, gripping the side for support, and the others followed, stepping out cautiously but safely. "You did it," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head, smiling gently. "You don't need to. I'm just glad everyone is safe." She looked at him, really looked, noticing the calm confidence, the humility, and the patience that had carried everyone through the ordeal. "It's more than just being glad," she said. You stayed calm when it was scary. You made us feel safe. That's rare. Very rare," he shrugged modestly. "I just do what I can. That's all anyone can do in a moment like this." She took a deep breath, still processing the experience. She had dealt with high-pressure situations before, but nothing like this. No reports, no meetings, no colleagues to rely on, just a stranger who had stepped in without hesitation to ensure her safety. The depth of his kindness and courage struck her in a way she didn't expect. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the soft hum of the lift machinery returning to normal. People moved around, thanking him, expressing relief, but she lingered, drawn to the sincerity in his eyes. "You're remarkable," she said quietly, almost to herself. He looked at her, puzzled. "I'm just doing what I think is right," she smiled, shaking her head. "It's more than that. Most people wouldn't even try. You didn't just help. You led us through it without fear, without ego. That leaves an impression." He felt a strange warmth, a mixture of humility and pride, not the pride of achievement, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had made a difference in someone's life. It wasn't about recognition. It was about the impact, however small, that a single action could have. As the situation settled, she finally extended her hand. "Thank you," she said, her eyes meeting his. "Truly, I don't often meet people like you, people who make such a difference without expecting anything in return." He shook her hand gently, smiling. "Just doing what anyone would do. It's nothing special." But she saw it differently. She saw courage, patience, and a heart that cared deeply. In that moment, she felt a rare sense of connection, the kind that wasn't based on status, money, or position, but on genuine human respect. Later, after the commotion had ended and people returned to their work, he went back to his tasks, moving quietly and efficiently. He didn't linger, didn't expect praise, and didn't ask for recognition. His life was already full, already complicated, and this was just another day where he had done what he could to help. But she couldn't stop thinking about him. She replayed the rescue over and over in her mind, the way he had remained calm, the way he had reassured everyone, the way he had treated her not as a CEO, but as a person in need of help. It was rare to meet someone whose actions spoke louder than their words, and she found herself wondering about him, wanting to know more. That evening, as he returned home, he felt the familiar exhaustion from the day's work, but also a quiet satisfaction. His child greeted him with hugs and stories, and he listened attentively, enjoying the simple joy of family life. For him, these moments were precious, reminders of why he kept going despite challenges. Helping someone else, especially someone who had seemed untouchable in her high-powered world, added another layer of meaning to his day. As he settled down for the night, he reflected on the events. The lift incident had started as a moment of chaos, yet it had turned into something unexpectedly meaningful. He realized that life had a way of presenting opportunities to make a difference, sometimes in the most unlikely circumstances, and while he didn't expect anything to come of it, there was a small, quiet hope in him, hope that perhaps this encounter was not the end, but the beginning of something more. Little did he know she was thinking the same thing. Across the city, in her quiet office, she sat at her desk long after the sun had set. She thought about him, about his calm presence and unwavering kindness. She felt compelled to reach out, to connect beyond the brief moments they had shared. Something about him had left an imprint, a reminder that even in a world dominated by power, money and status, genuine human kindness still mattered. And so, in those quiet hours, both of them unknowingly began the first threads of a connection that would slowly, gently, grow into something meaningful. A connection born not from coincidence alone, but from courage, empathy, and the simple choice to do what was right. The rescue had been over in moments, but its impact was lasting. Neither of them realized how much this single act would shape the days to come, influencing thoughts, actions, and perhaps even lives in that small, ordinary day. Amidst the bustle of the city and the routine of their separate lives, something extraordinary had happened, and it all began with a lift, a single act of courage and the quiet power of being truly present for someone in need. The days after the lift incident seemed ordinary at first. He went about his routine, waking early, preparing breakfast, helping his child get ready for school, and heading to the building for work. The city around him moved at its usual fast pace, people rushing, cars honking, and the endless hum of life going on. For him, each day was a careful balance of responsibilities. He rarely had time to think about himself, let alone about the brief encounter he had had with her. Yet, despite the busyness, her presence lingered in his mind. He remembered her gratitude, her calmness after the initial panic, and the way her eyes had held a mixture of respect and curiosity. It wasn't just the rescue. It was the human connection that had formed, brief though it had been. He found himself reflecting on it, wondering if she had really meant the things she said or if it was just politeness in a stressful moment. She, on the other hand, couldn't get him out of her thoughts. Back at her office, she found herself replaying the moment repeatedly, remembering how he had handled everything with calm precision. In a world where people often sought to impress her or prove their worth, he had been different. He had acted without ego, without expectation, simply because it was the right thing to do. She felt a rare sense of admiration, but also curiosity. Who was he really? What was his life like outside the building? She realized she wanted to know more. One afternoon, a few days after the incident, she decided to reach out. She drafted a message, careful with her words, wanting it to sound sincere without being overbearing. "I've been thinking about you and how you helped us the other day," she wrote. "It left a lasting impression. I'd like to thank you properly if you're open to it." She paused, reread it, and then hit send. When he saw the message, he was surprised. Most people would have simply said thanks and moved on. But this felt different. There was sincerity in her words, a quiet acknowledgement that made him pause. He felt a mix of curiosity and cautious excitement. He typed a brief reply. "Thank you for your message. I didn't do anything special, but I appreciate your kind words. When would you like to meet?" She responded quickly, suggesting a casual meeting at a nearby cafe. The thought of meeting her outside the stressful context of the lift both intrigued and unnerved him. It was rare for someone in her position to reach out genuinely like this. He considered his schedule, the responsibilities waiting for him at home, and finally agreed. "Tomorrow afternoon works," he wrote. The next day he prepared carefully, not for appearances but to be present and attentive. He wanted the encounter to be genuine, without pretense or formality. When he arrived at the cafe, he chose a quiet corner, observing the people around him, the smell of coffee and the warmth of the sun streaming through the windows. A few minutes later she walked in. She looked the same as he remembered, sharp, confident, yet approachable in a way that immediately put him at ease. "Hi," she said warmly, smiling as she approached. "Thank you for meeting me." "Of course," he replied, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. "I'm glad we could do this." They ordered coffee, but conversation quickly moved beyond pleasantries. She asked about his life, his work, and his child. He spoke openly, sharing stories of his daily routines, the challenges of being a single dad, and the little moments that made it all worthwhile. She listened intently, nodding, asking questions that showed she genuinely cared. "You manage so much on your own," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "It can't be easy," he smiled faintly. "It's not always easy, but it's worth it. My child keeps me going." Gives me a reason to push through the hard days." She leaned back, thoughtful. "I can see that. And you handle everything with such calm and grace. It's inspiring. Most people would be overwhelmed, frustrated, or impatient, but you don't let it show." He felt a quiet warmth at her words. Most of the time he went unnoticed, blending into the background as he fulfilled his responsibilities. To hear someone truly recognize his efforts, his patience, and his dedication was unusual. It was more than praise. It was acknowledgement, a validation of the life he had built and the choices he had made. As they continued talking, the conversation shifted naturally. She shared moments of her own life, not the polished public version, but the private struggles and victories she rarely discussed. He listened, genuinely interested, offering empathy and understanding without judgment. It was a rare experience for her, someone who would listen without trying to impress, someone who would connect without expecting anything in return. At one point she paused and looked at him seriously. "I wanted to meet you because I felt like I owed you more than a simple thank you. You've made me reflect on things I often overlook in my life. The value of kindness, the courage it takes to face challenges without complaint, the strength it takes to care for someone else." He was silent for a moment, considering her words. It was unusual for someone in her position to express such honesty, and it touched him deeply. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," he said quietly. "I just helped when I could. That's all." "But it's more than that," she insisted. "It's not just the action. It's the character behind it. The way you carry yourself, your focus on what matters, your humility. It left an impression on me I can't ignore." He felt a mixture of surprise and gratitude. He wasn't used to being seen in this way. His life was busy, sometimes exhausting, and he rarely received recognition for the quiet, consistent efforts he put in every day. And here she was, someone from a completely different world, recognizing it with sincerity. They continued talking for hours, though it never felt forced or long. The conversation flowed naturally with laughter, thoughtful pauses, and moments of reflection. They shared stories of family, of challenges overcome, and of the small victories that made life meaningful. Each word, each gesture, built a bridge of understanding between them, a connection that was genuine and rare. By the time they left the cafe, the sun was dipping toward the horizon. The city streets were alive with evening activity, yet there was a quiet sense of satisfaction between them. She thanked him again, sincerely, for meeting her and for the impact he had already made on her life. He smiled, feeling a sense of calm and fulfillment he hadn't expected from a simple conversation. As he walked home, he reflected on the day. The lift incident, which had seemed like a fleeting moment, had grown into something far more significant. It wasn't just about the rescue or the gratitude, it was about connection, about seeing someone for who they truly were and acknowledging their worth. She, too, walked away with thoughts swirling in her mind. She realized how rare it was to meet someone who could inspire without authority, who could connect without expectation. He had shown her a glimpse of a world beyond the pressures of her daily life, a world where kindness and courage mattered more than status or position. That night, he returned home to his child's laughter and stories, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Life remained busy and challenging, but the encounter had reminded him of the impact of small, genuine actions. And somewhere across the city, she was thinking of him in the same way, recognizing that a single moment of courage had created a connection neither of them could have anticipated. Little did he know, the next step in their story was approaching. A simple message, a thoughtful gesture, or a shared moment could change the course of their lives even further. The bond created by that brief act of courage and sincerity was growing quietly and steadily, leaving both of them aware of its significance even if they couldn't yet fully understand it. The days after the lift were no longer just ordinary. They were charged with potential. Every interaction, every message, every shared glance hinted at the possibilities that lay ahead. And both of them, in their own ways, felt the subtle but unmistakable shift that comes when lives begin to intertwine, when respect turns into curiosity, and when human connection begins to blossom into something deeper. The day she reached out to him, he felt a mix of curiosity and hesitation. Life had been busy, full of responsibilities, and he rarely allowed himself moments like this, moments where he paused and focused on someone else's intentions. Yet, her message carried sincerity, a quiet insistence that something important needed to be said. It wasn't just thanks. There was depth behind her words, a recognition of him that made his heart skip a beat, though he wouldn't admit it aloud. When they agreed to meet, he took the necessary precautions to be on time, not out of formality but out of respect. He left his apartment a little earlier than usual, ensuring he had a few moments to gather himself, to be present and focused. His child waved goodbye, already accustomed to the small sacrifices their father made daily. The walk to the meeting spot gave him time to think, not about what he might gain but about what he might learn. She was already there when he arrived, sitting at a quiet corner table in a small cafe. She looked calm and composed, yet there was an unmistakable warmth in her eyes. When she saw him, she rose slightly and offered a gentle smile. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "Of course," he replied, sliding into the seat across from her. He tried to keep his tone casual, but there was a subtle tension, an unspoken understanding that this meeting carried significance for both of them. They ordered coffee, but it remained untouched for a few minutes. Neither wanted to rush. Neither wanted to break the delicate flow of conversation that was about to unfold. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze meeting his. "I've been thinking about that day. In the lift," she began. "Not just the rescue, but everything. How you handled it, the calm, the focus, the way you made everyone feel safe. I've met countless people in my life, but very few have left such a mark. Very few have shown kindness without expectation, patience without hesitation, and courage without pride." He blinked, unsure how to respond. Most people's compliments felt empty or fleeting, but she spoke with sincerity, with a quiet intensity that made his chest tighten. I just did what seemed right," he said softly. She shook her head, smiling gently. "No, it was more than that. It was everything that comes with who you are, the struggles you face, the responsibilities you carry, the patience it takes to manage so much while still showing empathy and care for others. That's extraordinary, and I see it. I see you." Her words hit him in a way he hadn't anticipated. He had spent much of his life unnoticed, working tirelessly behind the scenes, often feeling invisible. To be recognized so deeply, not for accomplishments or titles but for character, was overwhelming. He felt a lump in his throat and a strange warmth in his chest. I don't know what to say," he admitted quietly. "You don't have to say anything," she replied. "I just wanted you to know that your actions, your character, your choices, they matter. They matter more than you might realize. You've made an impact not just on me but on everyone you've helped, even in ways you might never see." For a moment, silence filled the space between them. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy with meaning, with the weight of truth that rarely found its way into casual conversation. Outside, the cafe buzzed with activity, but inside their corner, time seemed to slow, allowing them to exist only in the moment, fully aware of each other. She reached out slightly, her hand resting lightly on the table, though not touching him. "I wanted to say more than thank you," she continued. "I wanted to let you know that meeting someone like you, it reminds me what really matters. In my world, there's so much focus on success, deadlines, appearances. But you reminded me that the heart, integrity, and kindness are far more important than titles or achievements. That lesson, that perspective, it's priceless." He looked down, a mixture of humility and disbelief swirling inside him. I never thought anyone would see it that way," he murmured. "I just try to do my best every day. That's all I can do. But it's enough," she said firmly. "It's more than enough. And I want you to know that your life, the way you live it, the way you care for your child, the way you handle challenges, it inspires me. Not just admiration, but inspiration. You remind me that courage and kindness aren't about grand gestures or recognition. They're in the everyday choices, the quiet consistency, the love you give without asking for anything in return. He felt a profound stillness wash over him. No one had ever said anything like this to him, not in such depth, not with such sincerity. His life had always been busy, full of responsibilities, struggles, and small victories, but rarely had he felt so truly seen, so understood. I don't know how to respond, he admitted again, voice barely above a whisper. You don't need to respond, she said, smiling softly. I just wanted you to hear it, to know that you matter, that the way you live your life, it's remarkable, and that it leaves a mark, even on someone like me, who has seen so much. The moment lingered, and he realized how much her words meant. They weren't casual flattery or empty praise, they were Anne,